All right, with that, I have the pleasure of introducing Mike. He's going to be our speaker the rest of the day. You're in good hands, but before we get all touchy-feely, we need to address something with Mike. When he was named CEO 10 years ago, everything was just fine. C12 HQ was right here in Greensboro, if you didn't know. Thank you very much. And just about everyone would say we were quite comfortable with being here and doing things the way they'd always been done. Then Mike came along and moved C12 to San Antonio, starts to make other uncomfortable changes for the rest of us. So first of all, before we welcome you, I just want to say, how dare you? I'm not laughing. Unfortunately, history has proven him right. Mike was prophetic in understanding that just fine and comfortable run precisely counter to our infinite God and his desires for his children and the kingdom he's building for them. Since Mike's tenure began, there have been significant investments made, and the Lord's given the gift of realized growth in multiple areas. Under his leadership, C12 has expanded abroad, including Brazil, Malaysia, Singapore, Taiwan, Ukraine in the middle of a war, South Africa, and Canada. There's others in there, I believe, that aren't mentioned. I saw a guy from Kenya. I know I saw him last time. We've seen significant growth in global membership, which he'll talk about a little later, significant growth in C12 chairs around the world. We've experienced growth in staff and in capabilities that we're able to deliver to you all. We see it in smoother operations, greater administrative support, increased brand awareness, and you all, our members, can most see it in the growth of your forums, the peers that are beginning to join around you. The launch of the C12 app, which was supposed to be an app for years. It was just a website, Mike. It is an app now, though, and the heightened quality of our monthly curriculum. But perhaps we feel it most, and most importantly, in faithfulness to Jesus and his call on our lives. From the top, Mike continues to push us all, chairs and members alike, both directly and indirectly, to press on, being a light that's not hidden, to develop these mustard seed communities that we've talked about in our cities and in our workplaces, where many can take refuge and taste and see the Lord's goodness wherever God has planted us, to lead out of gratitude and humility, and to hold ourselves and our brothers and sisters accountable to a loving God who longs for us to experience the fullness of joy that comes with walking in step with him. So Mike, we're grateful for how you are allowing the Lord to work through you and are excited to hear from you today. So please help me in welcoming Mike.
I was a little nervous if the office relocation thing would come up, so I was prepared for that. I should leave this over here. And I couldn't bring a concealed carry from Texas, so I realized I was also greatly outnumbered here, so I'm glad this went so gently. It is a joy. Let me get this caught up here. Get past that. Okay. First of all, it's an honor to be here with y'all. This is one of those markets that is got tremendous legacy. And I don't mean that in like it is. This is a market that's produced Hero Award winners. Look at John Davenport, the late Janet Ward Black. This is a place we regularly are featuring stories. Andy, I mean, you've been part of helping scale this thing and build a lot of those technologies. I joined C12 in 2010 as a member, and I tell my daughter, I'm looking around the room, frankly, half your faces were on the brochures I was looking at when I joined C12. Like this, you were the model. Like, you were Mr. GQ C12 chair, and I'm like, you're supposed to be wearing a sweater vest, and you're supposed to, like, I knew this room. So tremendous stories here, and it's incredible what this room represents. So I don't take it lightly. I do want to cover a couple different topics today. So we talk about a lot of things in C12. I'm going to give you a little bit of context of story about why I'm passionate about some things I'm going to share. So I'm going to give you a little background. I will give you a brief little update on some things going on in C12 and just kind of what bigger story you're part of, and I hope that encourages you, and some vision for the future. We do a lot of talk around strategic planning in C12, and I feel like I spend 8 months of the year strategic planning, and then 4 months starting it, and then starting to plan the next one already. So I'm there, but I really want to emphasize today's talk is meant to drive home how important this idea of SVA is, spiritual value add. I mean, everything you do in C12 matters. I don't believe God's glorified by poorly run companies. I believe we should crush it in sales and marketing, in use of technology. I think we should crush it in our cultures and our operations. All those things are incredibly, incredibly important. Team value add. Man, if there should not be a hallmark of a Christian-led company, should it not be for the way we care for people, grow people, heal people, love people? Like that should be a non-negotiable. But the one thing that no one of the business groups is going to talk to you about is the spiritual value add part. You can go to Harvard and learn great things about EVA. You can go study all sorts of great thought leaders on TVA. Very few people are going to talk about what is spiritual value add creation through business. And so I'm going to push on the thing that's least pushed on, and I want to push it in a way that hopefully makes you uncomfortable. And I want to invite us to, I'll give you some best practices. I'm going to give you a leadership idea, a little takeaway, but I want to leave you disturbed and with language that just makes the future legacy of Greensboro even greater than the Piedmont Triangle of the last 20 plus years. So at some point, I want the windshield to be bigger than the rearview mirror. And the rearview mirror here is awesome. But the risk of that is we could coast on what has versus go what will be. And I think what will be should be better than what was. And then at the end, we're going to do live Q&A. So in Q&A, it can be anything you want. So I'm a C12 member. I joined in 2010, stopped when I became a chair for a while. When I became CEO of C12, I jumped back in and been a member. My CBP is this August. I used to make the dumb mistake of when I travel saying, hey, if you guys want to proxy attend my forum and come to my CBP, you're welcome to, until I had like 24 people say, I'd like to come to Mike's CBP, and I don't really want to do it to like a ballroom of people, but I'm a C12 member. So as such, at Q&A time, it can be anything you want to ask. You guys just did the survey, but if you want to give me feedback, snide remarks, if you're still mad at me like Tripp, you can take it out on me. I can handle it. Any questions about the work we're doing, the mission, or the stuff we talked about today, nothing's off limits. If you want embarrassing stories about my kids, I'm not allowed to voluntarily embarrass Elena, but if you ask me a question that leads me to, that's on them, right? No? Okay, well, we'll see. Okay. So what I will not be doing, I will not be drawing in the air. So I've been asked that multiple times since getting here, and that's not happening today. If you like that, I'll make my first question answer explaining how I could and why I can't. But it's the number one question around the world. And I want to give kudos to Doug, Tripp, and Nick. Doing an event like this where you have to shuttle in so you're actually held hostage and can't leave, I think is a brilliant event hosting strategy. Like, pro tip, host events where people can't leave. It's a great strategy. So we'll start with my life and logos. Key things to know, context-wise. I fell in love with Jesus in 1989, transformed everything about my life. Was raised in Alaska, so identify as an immigrant living in Texas. I mean, if I can quote, this is a direct quote. First day in Texas, I moved there on a Saturday. My wife and I visited a church on Sunday. Monday, I reported to work. I called my sales manager up in McKinney, Texas, and I go, hey, Lloyd, this is Mike. And he went, Mike, are you that damn Yankee they sent down here to run things? And I was like, I'm more like Russian-Canadian. Alaska, it's kind of like other. Like, it's just altogether other. So I live in Texas. Cole is a legitimate Texan. My daughter has a Texan birth certificate. We still question. Got married to Jackie in 2002. So just had our 24th wedding anniversary back in May. Moved to Texas against my will in 2006. What's interesting about this plot here, at one point, the church I was attending asked me to come on staff for about 3 years, and was executive pastor there. But if you'd asked me when I was 12 years old, anybody remember the old Doogie Howser show? Last century? Okay. So I was like the Doogie Howser Jesus guy. So I fell in love with Jesus early, got involved in ministry stuff early. So I was on a church planning committee when I was 12, and then leading like citywide evangelism programs when I was 15. So I was at this retreat, and my pastor's like, well, Mike, what do you think you're going to be when you grow up? And I was like, Pastor Ken, I've got no idea. I'm 12. I don't know what I'm going to be. He's like, are you any ideas? I'm like, I thought about teaching history, being an artist. I mean, I just don't know. And he's like, you ever thought about doing ministry? And I said, Pastor Ken, I don't know what I will be, but I do know what I won't be. I will never work for a church, and I will never live in Texas. In 2006, I moved to Texas against my will with my wife. In 2008, my church asked me to come on staff. And I was like, darn it, I'm doing the exact things I promised I would never do. So now my wife and I say, we'll never live in Costa Rica, we'll never win the lottery. Just like can't handle it, God. Like, don't go there. 2010 was a big year. I became a father for the first time. Elena was born, and this is the year I joined C12. I actually joined C12 about 3 months before she was born. So she's literally grown up around C12, not known me not in C12. But this is my journey. I landed at C12 as a member in 2010, had never heard of it. Was dragged there against my will by a friend who was the first member of a forum. He said, you love Jesus, you love business, you should check this out. I said, if I go to a stupid meeting, will you stop bothering me about this? That's how much he nagged me. He said, yes. And I was like, fine. And I've only missed, I think, 2 forums since then. So that was a very expensive yes. So for those of you who are guesting today, just realize this is a very dangerous thing to come to once. It could be a long, long time in your life. You got 20-year people here, which is awesome. Became a chair at the end of 2011. Got a chance to lead a territory for a few years, and then, as you heard 10 years ago, had the distinct honor of getting to step in and lead this incredible organization as its 3rd-generation CEO, which is kind of fun because you're in what we call a Gen 3 market. So this is what you've seen this morning with Tripp and Doug and Nick is the 3rd generation of stewardship of this market for C12. Remarkable. You know, if Don had done some great things and then it went away, that'd been awesome. If Steve had taken the baton and grown it, that'd been a great thing. The fact that it's transitioned and continues to grow, that's remarkable. Anybody in multi-generation family businesses know that those are not things you take for granted. And so super proud of how well that's been done here. And similarly, I'm the 3rd generation leading the parent company. And so with that comes unique privileges and honors and challenges. So that's a little bit of background logo-wise. What really landed me in C12 was a distinct moment in 2004. Let me see. There we go. So in 2004, I had a moment, and I think we all have had this moment at some point in our life. Some of you may have been faster than me, but this took a while. I already indicated I love Jesus. I had a great church. I was well discipled. I didn't have a single pastor or person who sat down and told me that's bad theology, but I had a very much dualism life where my faith and work were totally separate, where I loved Jesus and church and volunteering and serving and reading, and I was trying to be really good at my job, and I was trying to learn how to do those things. And I got to a place where they kind of flirted with each other. They were fraternizing. I began to realize, like, man, working for a for-profit company allowed me to be super generous. I could sponsor kids and ministries, and I could do pro bono things, and I could invite people to conferences and to Easter service. And so there was a symbiosis where the two were flirting, but they still were 2 separate worlds. And I had no idea how to ever bring those things fully together. In fact, they felt like they were competing. The more I was successful in business, the less time I had, more money I had, but less time I had to do stuff in my church. And I started feeling bad about, like, man, I want to be about stuff that matters. And so I had this defining moment in 2004. I'm sitting at my desk in Chicago. I wrapped up a great week. And I asked God, man, is this it? Aren't I created for more? And I wrote a list of all the things I felt like I was supposed to be biblically. I knew I was supposed to be a disciple of Jesus. I was supposed to be an ambassador for Christ. I was supposed to be a minister of the reconciliation. I just started listing every follower of Jesus is called to these things. And I was like, man, I'm doing a lot of that on Sunday, on Wednesday, on Tuesday, but there's only so many evenings. There's only so much margin. God, if you want me to do this more, get me out of here. Get me a job where it's all about this. And the Holy Spirit met me at my desk that night, and I wrote this little on a piece of paper, and it was one of those things you're like, I know how to say the words, like with my mouth, but I have no idea what that actually means. And so it was, does my logo, does my vocation define my identity, or does my identity inform and transform my vocation? And literally it was like God said, if you have to change where you are to be who you are, then maybe you don't really understand who you are and who I am. Like, if that's the issue, Mike, if you got to get out of Chicago or get out of working for Walgreens, or if you need a different job so you can finally be faithful, I don't think you really understand what faithfulness looks like. And I was like, well, but God, I'm working for a public company. I don't know how to do all those things I just wrote down here. And he's like, that's okay. It's okay to be ignorant. Like, you can ask me how, but stop asking for a change of context. And so I left that night, not with an answer, but just with this, like, I have no clue how to do this, God. But would you show me how to be who I'm called to be no matter where I am? And I went from viewing my job as getting in the way of faithfulness to actually being the context for my faithfulness. And I didn't realize it then, but that was the beginning of, it was a tipping point in my whole story. In fact, ironically, 2 months later, I got offered a full ride scholarship to go to seminary, which sounded like just like manna from heaven, like God had provided a way. This was awesome. The week that I was supposed to accept that and resign from my job, a couple buddies called me and said, Mike, man, I know this seems amazing, but it feels like God's doing something in this whole question of like, how do you do ministry at work? What if you're supposed to be like a corporate pastor? What if you're actually supposed to do ministry in corporate America? And I went, what in the world would that look like? And they're like, I have no idea. But it just seems like God's teaching you something, and what if leaving that to do traditional seminary and traditional church work would be missing what he's trying to forge in you? And I didn't know what that would mean. Talked to my wife, Jackie went, I think something about that rings true. Like, I feel like God's trying to teach you something, and leaving it would be a mistake. And so I said no to the seminary scholarship and stayed in business, going, what in the world would it look like to do ministry in business? I have no idea. Not even knowing this thing called C12 existed, and this whole idea of business as a ministry. So defining moment that kind of just put me down a path. So a couple things to know about me. I'm nerdy, if you didn't already pick up on that. I'm driven, so I'll just go ahead and confess. This is my lab results. So whatever your preferred instrument of assessing people, this is the 15 different ways to basically say Mike's driven, nerdy, data, introverted, intense, cares about details. I was hanging with Pat Lencioni last week in Nashville, and he was like, oh, I forget you're one of those weird people if you like the working genius, where you're wonder, so you like big picture questions, but you're also tenacity, like work really hard and want all the details to be right. He's like, that's exhausting to work for. He's like, you're a great friend. You'd probably drive me nuts if I had to work for you. Dave Galati, sorry about that. I spent a lot of my life trying to answer the question, like, why do I exist? I think the biggest question for all of us is to be faithful in stewarding who you are. Like, God's put you here for a reason for you. It's not to do all the things, it's to do your unique thing, and we got to find that thing. And so from a young age, I've just wanted to know, who am I? Why am I here? What's my purpose? I've stayed that in different ways. I went through an intensive course for a few days that helped me get language. So I would now say things like, I exist to lead people to live their destiny in an Ephesians 2:10 way, like you heard Tripp mention earlier, while catalyzing movements of sustainable gospel flourishing. Or I'll shorten that, and you'll see me sometimes just sign things off saying catalyzing destiny. Like, that's, no matter what brand I'm working for, what business I'm in, that's who I'm created to be. What I will do can look like a lot of different ways. So I'm nerdy about purpose. I think this is super important. I'm invested a lot in trying to figure it out. In fact, in light of today's curriculum, I did throw all my lab results. I took my assessments, I took my story work, my purpose work, my retreat notes, threw it into AI and said, forget customer journey map, just who am I? And AI told me who I am. This is what AI just took all that stuff and actually created this nice little scatter plot a couple weeks ago and said, hey, here's your why, taglines, sweet spots for you. So I'm trying to live out who I am, but it doesn't just stick with me, it sticks with my poor family. So my poor daughter, Elena, by the time she was 5, she could recite our family mission, vision, values, measures, taglines. In fact, I felt like I was winning as a nerdy dad when I came down from Easter Sunday, and I think she was 6, and she was drilling her 3-year-old sister at the breakfast table before I got down. Do you remember the core values? What's the tagline? What's the tagline? Da-da-da. So, sorry, not sorry for the warping you've had to do. Probably the only soon-to-be sophomore who can recite not only her family mission statement, strategy, vision, values, measures, but our company one, because she's had to sit through 47 onboarding dinners for new chairs in my house, so she could recite our company mission, vision, values, doctrine, and promise. So I do all this because I think it's super important we know, like, what's the goal? Now, we miss at that. Like, it's one thing to have a cool graphic on our fridge and have the kids memorize stuff, but it's another thing to live it. It's one thing to know my personal goals and vision and values. It's another thing to be faithful to it. But I will say this, you make a lot more shots you're aiming at. You miss 100% of the shots you never take. And so at least having an idea of the goal has helped us course correct and calibrate much, much more faithfully to that. And I have this incessant conviction that time is short. So if you guys were here back in December, there's a reference to this in our curriculum, but this is a true practice. So I've actually now, as of this past Saturday, I just moved my 778th marble since starting this practice. So on a certain birthday, my wife gave me a glass cylinder with a blue marble for every week of life expectancy I had left, and then an empty one. And every Saturday night since then, I move a marble from the actuarially available column to I've now spent the one thing I can't make more of. And it's a reminder for me, because you and I can make bad investments, lose money, make more money on the next one. You can have ventures that fail and all those things. You can recover from most things, but you and I will never recover time. And at some point, we're going to stand before God, And I'm all about generosity, all about giving, and I don't think most of us even know what generosity means. However, I don't think we're going to get up to heaven and God go, show me your tax deductible receipts as the primary index of stewardship. As things asked, what did you do with your whole life? Every moment, what did you do in Christ? Did it matter? Did it count? And specifically, did you do what I called you to do, not what you tried to make it do for everybody else? And so this drives this, and I believe part of the reason why you're in C12, part of the reason why you'd spend a day out of your business, away from your family, doing something like this, is because you somewhat share this sense of, man, story matters, life matters, results matter, and I want to make sure it matters to Jesus. And I think the greatest risk for all of us is not, can we survive? But it's, can we actually be successful at things that truly, truly matter? Francis Chan said it super, super well. Life is more than just figuring out how to survive comfortably. It's actually not very hard to figure out how to make your business sustain. But building a great business for a greater purpose, actually doing business as a ministry, actually living a life where Jesus say, well done, that does not naturally happen. That's actually tricky. So I hope every month is actually spurring you to do more of the stuff that would have you say, maybe I don't get recognized in some big magazine, but I'm doing the kind of stuff that Jesus would say, well done. Like that's ultimately what we're here to do. Okay, transition, a little bit about the company. So I lead a little business. So C12 is a for-profit company that started in 1992 by a guy named Buck Jacobs, who's an amazing saint. He now lives in northern Georgia. Moved to North Carolina when it had its first employee, Don Barefoot. He happened to be here. And I get a chance to be the third generation leader of it. I got about 37 employees. Most of them are in San Antonio, a couple spread around the country. And tomorrow morning at 7:30 a.m. Central, we'll be commissioning our 250th chair. Yeah, that's great. Dave Galati knows when we were crazy dreaming about that. And sometime in about the next 2 to 3 weeks, we'll hit 5,000 members. So I'll show you some charts and graphs and that stuff. But it's a strange little business. It was in North Carolina from 2005 to 2016. The best years. I don't want to live in Texas either. And then
That's not what I heard, Mike. I was in the room when you said we're moving to San Antonio.
But I didn't want to live in Texas first. I was sitting in the hotel room last night being like, what would my life look like if we had stayed here? It would have been different, maybe better. Tripp saying yes. For what it's worth, it's prettier here, it's nicer here, it's greener here. There's a lot of things good here. But here we are. Crazy. Some of you guys know C12 started in Florida. It was really heavy in the southeast for a long time, and it began spreading west. This is just a map where some blue dots are showing where there's newer forums more recently. So we've got 16 members in Nairobi. So we're just talking to John. Like, John's heading to Kenya. I'm like, you got to meet Frank Katanga and the 16 members that have been formed there. We got 2 forums now in Nairobi, of all places. We'll have 20 chairs in South Africa by this summer. We're actually doing a C12 conference in Africa in September. We're doing a C12 conference in Brazil for South American members this November. Like just wild. Just had our first forum that is full in Toronto, launching our second forum next month. So we're in Canada finally. Taiwan, Singapore, Malaysia. We also launched we just had our first forum this month in Milwaukee. So we got our first forum of members launched there. First members in Louisville, Kentucky. First ones in San Diego this month. Reno last month. Tulsa next month. Columbus, Ohio this month. Rio de Janeiro this month. And then Ukraine. And just a little confession on Ukraine. We're going to talk about being dangerous. I want to talk about the fact that you're called to be dangerous. And if you're not living dangerously for Christ, then I'd argue you are in danger with Christ. Those are kind of the options. You're either living dangerously for him, or I'd say your soul is in danger. But you want to talk about me being humbled. We actually had 4 members join in Kyiv this week. The group started a year and a half ago. We had 4 new members enrolled this month, or this week. So ironically, actually, if we were to look at membership by week, the number 1 market for new members this week is Kyiv. I don't know if you know, but it's a little tricky there. And here, you want to talk about being humbled. I'll share this unplanned story. 2023, war's already broken in Ukraine. There's a Ukrainian leader. He owns 5 businesses. He's also president of the Ukrainian Soccer Federation. He was at an event in Turkey where a C12 member from Florida talked about his business's ministry testimony. There was a meetup of a bunch of BAM folks, business as mission folks from around the kind of Russian former Soviet areas, and an American was part of the group and just happened to share a BAM story. And this Ukrainian went, man, I love the things you're describing. You had like really specific things you're doing and really specific thoughts and this whole idea of like 5-point alignment matrix. Like, where'd you get all this stuff? And he's like, well, I've been in C12 for years. And he went, what is C12? And he told him. The guy flew and went to a forum in Florida, went back and appealed and asked for government permission to leave the country because he's a military-age male with family. Got permission to leave the country in the wartime to come see me in San Antonio to ask, could I do C12 in Ukraine? Meets me, impressive guy, Zhenya Dostov. Tells me his story, background, like, you seem like a perfect chair. Here's the thing, I don't know if you knew this, but there's a war in your country. Like literally, like we talked about, like markets being hard, but it's like there's bombs falling out of the sky in your city right now, and being a C12 chair is not the easiest job in the world. I think Steve could attest to that. Like, it's not the easiest job. I said, a lot of people struggle to do the like business development and marketing and finding people and finding venues, and we don't usually have to think about venues blowing up or power going out or these different problems. So like, I think you're the right kind of person, but I think you should probably go back and just like take care of your family, get through the war, and when the war is over, then let's talk. And after I got done lecturing him about prudence and wisdom and being like, let's be practical here. And I got up on a whiteboard and I made my case really, really clear. And he sat there and he was taking notes and he said, are you done? And I said, yes. And he went, is the only reason you can tell me not to do this is because it's hard and dangerous? Yeah. And he slammed his fist down and he went, if I wanted an easy life, I would have grabbed my wife and kids and left the country last year. I'm a successful entrepreneur. I've got wealth, I've got connections. I don't have to be living in a war zone. Mike, I don't think the church is called to evade darkness, but to be light in darkness. And so in the darkest moment in our continent, you're telling me not to do something that could change the country because it's hard? Like, isn't that why we're here? Mike, I'm living in the middle of the war zone because I believe this is the time where the oppression to the gospel is actually most open in Eastern Europe. He's like, right now, if you're willing to create jobs and bring any kind of money in, the government lets you do anything. Like, all religious oppression is just kind of down. They're just like, if you can create jobs and bring money, you can go. And he's like, I want to build as many businesses, as ministry as possible and see this become a launch point for the gospel across Eastern Europe. This is like a D-Day for the gospel here. Mike, you tell me it's hard and dangerous is not a reason not to do this. So what other reasons do you have why I can't do this? And I was like, bah. Now that I feel about this tall spiritually, none. And so he gave me his business plan about, hey, I've already mapped out, there's venues we can meet at that are not near high-value targets like power plants and military bases. So the probability of these venues being blown up by missiles is really low. So I think I can get people to meet there. Now, power will go out when missile strikes, so here'd be our backup generator plan. Here'd be our secondary sites. I found a printer who would print the curriculum for us in country, but if that gets blown up, here'd be, and you want to talk about like launch plans. Trip, we talk about like launching as a chair, like we don't do anything around disaster planning or what to do if your site gets blown up. As he said, like in December, you guys had your December forum, you're going through the annual audit. Literally, missiles knocked out the power grid for where they're meeting. The members refused to go home and kept meeting by candlelight to finish their forum day and said, we're going to finish and lock in our to-dos, even if there's no power. This is what we must do. So if you ever complain that the cookies weren't great, or the breakfast could have been better, or, you know, Nick, I'd like better coffee, like, with all due respect, think about our friends in Kyiv. Think about our friends in Lviv, who are literally building businesses right now saying, this could change our continent. Let's build in hard places. Like, anytime I get a complaint, I have a hard time not thinking. Like, reset your pain scale. So, bonus story there. We are here because we believe this, and he believes this, that businesses and ministry can literally change the world. That when we do all things as unto Christ, particularly in business, it literally has an opportunity to change culture, change cities, change industry, change lives, ours included. Don't take it from me, this big beefy guy named Tim Tebow, he put a CEO in C12. He's got 5 key players in, and he would say, if you know Tim, he does amazing work in the area of sex trafficking and rescuing children. But he also has a for-profit portfolio. And he'd say, man, our mission was fantastic out there. Baptist Children's Home, your mission's unbelievable. Literally rescuing children here in North Carolina, right? Tim went, I don't know that the way we were running the business to rescue children was as honoring to God as the mission of rescuing children. The way we're hiring and firing and managing and planning, I don't know if those things were as beautiful and holy as the things out there. C12 is helping them do that. We're not helping them rescue kids more. We're helping them be a more effective organization that then does go rescue kids. So pretty cool. Took a bunch of C12 members up to Oklahoma last fall in October, had dinner with Craig Rochelle, and he got done asking them what they're doing in their businesses, his ministry, and he said, it just like this like confessional statement. He said, this may be the single most important thing for the church to learn about right now. He's like, if every Christian going to churches like I lead were actually doing businesses and ministry, what would that do to our country, to our world? And he went, we just don't get this. This is what we're trying to do together. You know this is part of why we're here, that God is working in us. He's working in me. It's why I'm a Soul C12 member. As we do this is not just about us, but it's also about the story he's writing and what we're telling through the way we lead businesses. I don't know about you. I used to think I was a pretty good Christian until I started evaluating myself in faithfulness into all areas of business. And we start saying you're judged by how well you handle that personnel issue and that financial issue and that planning issue and that customer issue. You start being like, maybe I'm not a good Christian after all. And the reality is C12 is a dojo for our own discipleship and making us confront who we are, why we are, what we do about things. The business I lead is held accountable to the same status as you are, same issues: economic value add, team value add, spiritual value add. Since I'm going to push on SVA, here's some ways we look at SVA, and here's some of the most encouraging news I could share. As we have scaled and grown, I'll show you charts about that. That is cool. Growth is important. But one of the questions I was always haunted by, Buck called me 2 months into my role and said, as we get bigger, make sure we don't just get huge, but are we getting holy? Like, are we actually growing the things that matter? So these are some of the stats we measure around the impact of this model on leaders like you. And this is looking back the last few years. So this is growth of percentage of companies with chaplaincy. So one of my scorecards is actually percentage of companies that have chaplaincy, because we see it at least 2x the rate of people coming to Christ and ministry fruitfulness in the companies that have them. Like, there's just, no matter how in love with Jesus you are, you can never be all the things to all the people all the time, and you shouldn't be, and some of you aren't very good at it anyway. So, like, hire professionals who can be there and who can really do it anywhere, everywhere, and not just you, but your vendors, your customers, and be around. But these stats, what's cool about these, so 85% implementing a ministry in the first year, which is striking because it's also the percentage of CEOs who, when they come to C12, have never heard of this before. So 85% of the CEOs we meet have never even heard you can do this. So we're introducing that idea. Then they're implementing something. Here's what the green marks on the side say. And just to be like how big a deal this is the number change of that attribute from the same point the previous year. So this is 2025 data. As you guys wrapped up your surveys, I'll know the 2026 data next month. But literally, as of last year, 67% of members had updated their mission, their vision, and their values to reflect kingdom principles and kingdom truth. It was 50% the year before, and it was 42% the year before that. So 17 points higher in 1 year, as we did a big emphasis on that in curriculum. Caring teams, 34% up from 23%. Generosity programs, et cetera. What's exciting to me is, I'm a data nerd, so if we go back and look at this stuff, in the last 5 years, our rate of implementation of adoption is up 60% over what it was 5 years ago. So as we're getting bigger, we're actually getting better and faster at this. So as we think about having lots and lots of members, that's lots and lots of members running for-profit missional outposts, changing lives all around the world. That is super exciting for me. We do have a ministry scorecard. I won't bore you with the spreadsheet of it, but like, we track in-office measurements of devotions and people served and dollars spent and care and people gone to marriage retreats. And we just do measurement for our chairs and how we care for them. We do stuff around our industry and our customers and our vendors. Some highlights. So right now we're actually up about 970 companies with chaplaincy. Partnering with Jason was just down in South Africa for like 11 days because we're going to be launching chaplaincy in South Africa because it's our fastest growing market in the world. So we have 100 members there, and we'll probably have 175 by Q1 next year. And so we're going to launch chaplaincy there so we can start serving those work sites. Through chaplaincy last year, 24,000 gospel presentations at work and 577 salvations just from chaplaincy reports. That's just one method of evangelism, obviously. Yeah, crazy. We partner with the Pocket Testament League to give out Gospels of John. Some of you put it in boxes, give it to customers, hand it to employees, etc. Last year, it was an all-time high. I think the previous year was 140. Previous year was about 105. So last year, almost 180,000 Gospels of John were distributed out by C12 member companies. Huge evangelism plays there. At least 5 key players we know of came to Christ in forums. Almost 600 people attended a Greater Purpose workshop, and then we got a chance, we give as a company from our income, and we're able to give out $170,000 to ministries, and then we've now put 30% of our stock in donor advised funds through National Christian Foundation as well. I share this to go, hey, we practice what we preach. We're trying to measure these things, drive these things. But the question for all of us is like, what will the story, that's the past, what will the story of our future be? Will the businesses you lead, whatever kind of business you have, will it truly be a dangerous business? Is it the kind of business that would warrant being attacked by the enemy, being resisted, being oppressed? Is it actually doing something that will change industries and cities? And if not, then I think our souls are in danger. So you're in a Gen 3 market, which is awesome. This is the growth of the Piedmont Triad over the last number of years. So what year did you get involved, Steve? 2005. So just before this is just after that. This is, I think, the January 2026 or 2006 activity report numbers. 2016, and then as of the beginning of this month here in 2026. So cool to see this thing. This is not about preserving a cool thing. This is a growing thing that's also doing more things than ever has before. The question will be, that's the past. Amazing, great job. C12 heroes, current speakers. I think we're about to do a video about you, right? Paytel? Yeah. I think, little secret, in November we're doing a curriculum set around faithful transition planning. If you have a business as a ministry, shouldn't that change the way you think about exit strategies? And what do you need to do today to be ready for whatever exit path you're going to do? Whether you're going to do family, strategic buyer, go public, ESOP, whatever it may be. And we're going to use the Paytel story as a great case study in that. So this market has been producing all kinds of case studies. John, candidly, it is easier to find members who will volunteer to share highlight stories. We crush it at this, do a story. Mike Boss this morning, here's how we're using AI in really cool ways. It makes him look really smart. When we say, hey, who's got a story about failing at something? We're like, yeah. We know the room is full of those, but no one wants to do that video. You sharing last April, hey, when you're doing great things and life's just hard, when you're doing all this stuff for Jesus and you get punched in the face and you wrestle, we don't have a lot of members offer to say, yeah, I'd love to tell that story. And I'd love to leak a little bit about how it wasn't all clean and pretty. And most responded to, most asked about, most like, oh my gosh, that story. That's what this market has been producing. The question then becomes like, where does it go from here? How will you leverage that? So here's a confession. I'm going to show the last chart and graph, and then we'll get into cool story stuff and talk about SBA impact. This is a really cool chart if you're a performance junkie, data nerd, and you like to win. So I'm guilty of all those things. I was preparing for a Q3 board meeting last summer, and I was needing to assemble some slide deck stuff, and I went, I'm going to go back and just do a little query and pull data from different periods of time and just kind of stack it instead of being year. Let's just go do 5-year increments. And so this is realistic data. This is the growth of total membership and CEOs and then shares going back to 2000. Not the beginning of C12 time, but the time where we began to really expand. These are the kind of charts you like to do as a CEO because they go up and to the right. It looks really, really pretty. Hubris, my flesh, I'm like, oh, I joined here and I became CEO here. And then look, there's like this increased curve, and that's kind of fun. Let me just put that in front of the board. So as I was preparing all that, I got it all done, polished it up, looking, I was like, yeah. And I was actually looking, what started it was, we're a for-profit company. We raised capital one time to help capitalize hiring a CEO, opening up an office, and then since then never had to raise more capital. But we had 7 people who wrote checks to put money in to help the thing scale. It had been bootstrapped until there. We've zeroed that today. And that money was put in back in the 2004, 2005 time period. And I wanted to go tell those people what a return on investment. Like, hey, you wrote a $100,000 check in 2004 or 5, and you wrote it candidly going, I don't know if I'll ever see this again. It was one of those like angel investing going, it's for the kingdom. I don't know if I'll ever get this back. And look what God has done with it. Like, what an amazing return. Like how many lives impacted, how much scale. So I was trying to do a well done, good and faithful servant. Look at the 10x return you've gotten. And it was going to ask them, how many of you would invest again today? I wasn't raising capital. But how many of you do today if you knew you could get that kind of return? And they're all like, all day long. Best $100,000 I ever invested. But as I did that, the Holy Spirit slapped me. So this is true. And it is great to go back and go, okay, $100,000 invested then, look what it did here. Good rate of return. It's God's business, it's not mine. I get to be the CEO of that business. If God renews my contract and I get to be CEO again in 2026, this is what he's asked me last summer, then I've got to reset the cost basis. Anybody ever sold a business or sold real estate with capital gains appreciation? I mean, ask this, who here, you founded your business? Okay, founders. So you're, David, what was the cost basis of your business? Zero. Which means everything you ever sell for from there isn't just gain, congratulations, but, and I don't think North Carolina is as bad as California and Maryland and some other places, but a lot of governments are going to be like, congratulations, not only do you get to pay income taxes, but there's now capital gains tax on everything above the cost basis because you paid zero for it, and you're going to sell it for hopefully a lot more than zero. And that's why people do things like DAFs, because by the way, if you give some of your stock away before you sell it, you don't pay cap gains tax. So you take it out of the IRS and you give it to cool causes. Highly recommend that stuff. God said, Mike, you keep wanting to compare, and it looks really good to your flesh to compare 2025 to 2015 or 2010 or 2005. At some point, you have to reset the cost basis. This business has been sold, transitioned, you're new. Okay, if you get renewal of contract, what would it look like if the new cost basis that you're evaluated on is no longer how much growth since yonder year, but this is now day one? Well, if 2025 is day one, it's a lot harder to get 5x returns. It's a lot hard, like anybody who started a small business, it's really cool to show 20% growth, 40% growth, 50% growth. It gets really, really hard as the business gets bigger and bigger and bigger. 250 chairs to do 50% growth, that's hard. We're a $60 million global network. It'd be hard to 5x that business real quick. There's ways you're talking about 5xing it back here. So as I started going, what? God's like, yeah, are you going to show me a 5x, 10x return on this if this is your new cost basis? God, if God gives you your business back today with your current revenue, your current employees, your current knowledge, your platform, and says, that is your talent I'm giving you, I'm going to come back and ask, do I get a 5x? Do I get a 10x? Like, what's the return I get? I went from being really excited to going, well, that's hard. That's a little scary. What will the 2030 and the 2035 look like compared to this one, not compared to back there? And I got to start shrinking the timeline. So whatever your business is at today, I encourage you, if you're to reset the cost basis today and you're going to be accountable to God for its SVA impact, EVA impact, TVA impact compared to today, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, are you positioned to lead in such a way that he'd say, well done, that was a great investment? Because the servant who did nothing, who was like, I'm going to bury this and give it back to you the way I got it because I don't want to risk losing, God called him wicked. He said, how dare you, wicked servant? So if you've been around C12 for a while, we just wrapped up a 5-year vision plan. Our 2025 vision had a bunch of things to it, but it had some highlights like this. Some of them we achieved, some were a few months late on. So like I mentioned, we're hitting 250 chairs tomorrow, 5,000 members next month. We're on 5 continents now. We hit the rest of those goals. So we set these targets back in 2020. The world looked a little different when I set in the targets. I started planning about a year ago for what's the 2030 plan going to be. So we spend most of our year planning for the year, it sounds like. So we spent a year discerning, because I don't think strategic plans, when you're looking 5 years out, are meant to be forecasts or predictions. It's like a little bit make you pucker, make you nervous, like vision, like we've got to go there. And now we start working backwards of what's it going to take to go there. So we put a vision that we felt God was calling us to and are now trying to figure out and scale up to how to do it. In fact, our rally cry this year as a team was scaling capacity to fulfill the vision. Like, it's not like, do we need to do this now? It's what would it take to have 500 chairs? What's it going to take to support 10,000 members? Like, so what we feel we're supposed to invest in for the next season is to actually 2x our reach between now and 2030. And so some of those highlights means things like this. It means being part of a community of 10,000 members. That's going to take 450 chairs. We'd be in 200 cities. If you think about it, there'd be So get to hiring. We want to have 2,000 companies with chaplaincy by 2030. So you guys need to hire a lot of chaplains. Okay, I remember that. I'm going to come back to you and say, you said you're ready. There's a lot of different pieces, but it's more than just like big growth pieces. You can't read all this, but really it's about like, how do we actually seize this moment to take ground, to do enough kingdom damage to literally change the generational narrative of businesses and ministry? Because one of the things that drives me nuts is, again, 85% of the business owners we talk to, we are introducing to the journey of businesses ministry. I would love it if a generation of young entrepreneurs raise up where the question is just, how can C12 help me do businesses ministry better than I can do it on my own? Because I'm going to do businesses ministry. That's just a given. I'm just want to know how you guys can help me with that. I would love to have that narrative flipped and actually change the way people think about what's possible. Now, I'm sharing all this stuff. I'm going to share a couple scary stories. I'm going to share some cool stats. I want to both agitate and inspire you because I also believe a certain math equation is correct. My buddy John, you're talking about trying to get people to do healthcare stuff. This is an annoyingly true formula. This is the formula for getting people to change behavior. If you want people to change, this little study would say, and by the way, it's really important to notice is that those are multiplication numbers, not addition symbols, which means anytime there's a zero, the whole thing is nulled out. So to overcome inertia, the resistance to change, this side of the equation has to equal 2x whatever the resistance level is. Not equal, but it has to be 2x. So if you're not dissatisfied, if you don't fundamentally go like, I'm not okay with where I'm at. I'm not content with the story playing on. I don't want this to be my story 5 years from now. I don't want a Bema seat encounter with Jesus today. If you're not dissatisfied, if that first one is zero, no amount of curriculum and worksheets and videos and tools will matter. So at some point, you can come to C12 all you want, but if you're not fundamentally dissatisfied with the status quo, you won't do anything because resistance is super high. And then if you don't have a picture where you go, man, I want that story to be true for me. I know God's called me to this, and I don't know how, but I've got to go there. If you don't have dissatisfaction that's more than zero, vision that's more than zero, then first steps are helpful. How could I do it? I don't know how. Well, C12 is a how shop. Like how many of you guys feel like we give you enough content every year, enough new ideas? Anybody feel like you're drowning in new ideas from C12? How high can you put it up there back there? Like, we flood you. We rock the first step business. Do this and this and this and this and this and this and this. Honestly, if you just implemented 1, 2, or 3 ideas a year, actually implement 1, 2, 3 ideas a year, you will totally change everything. But you won't implement anything of significance if you're not wildly dissatisfied and captivated by a bigger vision. That's just human cost. Now, take that in your own business. You're trying to get customers to do anything, get people to do anything. If they don't have that formula, getting them to change behavior just won't happen. You just get all head nods. So I'm hoping today you leave a little dissatisfied going, man, I'm not content with where I'm at in a godly way. I'm hoping you leave today going, God, I think our business is meant for more. And I hope you start asking for, can someone help me? We'll figure out the first steps later. But if you don't have a white hot what and why, like God, this is, I've got to be about this. Then you'll have excuses for everything else. Like we are so guilty of informational gluttony, spiritual obesity, a diabetes of disobedience. Like we say we want things, but the reality is if we don't have a super hot what and why, then all the other stuff we could talk about doesn't really matter. So I'm going to tell you one story before I give you a tool and some best practices on SVA. But in March, we just had one of the Iranian church leaders. He came to talk about the growth of the Iranian church. And as he was telling great stories and how hungry they are for the Word of God and what's happening there, which is incredible. If you've not read about it, go read about the Iranian church. Super encouraging. His throwaway comment at the end is what wrecked the whole event. He said, one thing you need to know. Do you know that last fall, before the war, most recent war started, there was a lot of Iranians protesting in the streets. You may have saw the news that they were mowed down with machine guns. So 42,000 civilians were executed in the street with machine guns, just recklessly shot by their own government for protesting. Crazy. We can't even actually fathom that. Like, that's a number I say, and you can't fathom 42,000 Americans being mowed down. Like, we can't picture that. He said, but what you may not realize is that many, many, many of those 42,000 were Christians. And we're like, what? And he's like, not because of Christian persecution. They weren't being shot because they were Christians. Iranian Christians were running out and diving in front of the bullets to save their Muslim brothers and sisters and neighbors in the execution, and bleeding out on the street would say, I am saved. Jesus died for me. I'm dying for you to give you more time to know Jesus. And part of the fuel of evangelism in Iran right now is the sacrificial martyrdom, voluntary martyrdom of the church, dying for their Muslim neighbors because they want their Muslim neighbors to know Jesus. And there's something pretty darn powerful when a neighbor's dying in your arms for you, saying, I want you to know Jesus. I can't really picture that kind of sacrificial love. We have a hard time being nice to someone who roots for the other football team or votes different than us or goes to a different denomination, let alone, can you imagine us dying for someone who literally is opposed to us, who would have turned me in yesterday, and now I'm dying for them? So I don't think I actually know what love looks like at the level the Iranian church is living it. He told the story. Everyone's super moved, stunned, silent, in awe of that kind of love. He's about to leave, go back to Iran, and we said, hey, can we pray for you before you leave? And he's like, that'd be great. And he kind of made a face like, what? He's like, well, I've talked to 2 church groups when I was in the U.S. before I go back, and every time I do, Christians like you like to pray for me. But Americans pray weird. And he said, what? He's like, and I don't know, maybe it's because I'm from Iran, but you guys pray very different than we pray. And we're like, well, how so? And he said, every time I've been in a church and you guys go to pray, people say, we're praying for the regime in Iran to change. We're praying for the church to be protected, praying for no Christian to die, praying that you'll be safe, praying for the war to end, praying for the economy to improve, all those things. He's like, we don't pray for any of that. We just don't see that being the prayers in the Bible. He's like, all of our prayers are, God, you found us worthy to suffer for you. May we be found faithful. Father, would you give us courage and hope to represent you well in this moment? Father, thank you that you've invited us to, in this moment, represent you in our neighborhood. Thank you that we get to do this. Would you give us strength? Would you give us hope? Would you help us love well in this moment? We're not praying for things to be easier. We're praying for us to be better. But all the prayers I've heard in America are about safety and comfort. And he went, has Christianity changed? Because maybe we pray wrong over there. He has been saying that, and like everyone's like uncomfortably like, you're right, because we were about to get up and pray those very things over him. Protect him, bless him, give him resources, help nothing happen. And he's like, please don't. That's not our prayer request. And he went, and I don't see that being a biblical prayer request. A woman at my church, Jamie, once asked, we were at a prayer gathering, and she said, we're about to pray. Before we do, I just have a question. It's one of those like horrible, like judgy statements to say right before you pray, because then everyone's afraid to pray. Because she said, if God answered every prayer request of the last 2 weeks, would the kingdom have advanced and how many lives would be changed? Or would you just be more comfortable and happy? If God answered every prayer you'd asked the last 2 weeks, would the world be different, the kingdom advance and lives change, or would you just be happier and more comfortable? And we should probably then think about our prayers. So I did a little AI search, because again, I don't know if AI helps sales and marketing, but it helps with memes and graphics. But I went and sleuthed all the prayers that Paul ever wrote to a church in the New Testament, and then said create a word cloud based upon the density of how often that phrase is used. And what's fascinating is in an era where there was massive banking issues, financial issues, currency destabilization, hostility to Christianity, Christians being killed, socially ostracized, discrimination happening, disease issues, there was not a single letter to a church in the middle of a war zone where he said, I pray Nero dies. I pray for banking reform. I hope the job market gets better. I hope fuel prices come down. I hope you get favor. Not a single prayer request was for relief of pain. These are the words that Paul prayed to Christians in the middle of hell, circumstantially. We can't even grasp. And this was his prayer request for them. So I think we need to do a little reckoning with our American love affair with security and comfort, because I don't think that's what we're called to do. And if you're not discomfortable with your comfort, then you're probably not going to ever have a vision or first steps that will overcome the resistance to change as you do crazy SVA stuff. You know, if God, I like to say my nickel phrase here, a missiology of cartography, which just basically means, what do you learn from maps? If God wanted his people to have a comfortable life, he should never have taken Abram from Ur and said, go to the literal epicenter of the Middle Eastern world, where you'll be at the crossroads of culture and civilization and commerce and military forces and conflict. Like, I'm going to put you right in the middle of it to be an embassy of this one true God. He should have had him go to Alaska, where I'm from. Like, there's nobody there. Or like Greenland's for sale, apparently. Like, he could have given him Greenland. He could have moved him all sorts of places and given them like a retreat away from the mess and said, here you go, people. Spend time just praying and worshiping me here in abundance. But he said, I'm going to put you right in the middle of war. I'm going to put you right in the middle of tug-of-war of culture, because he wanted to be an embassy for his kingdom. That's where God put them by design. And then Paul says you and I are to be ambassadors, not bunker managers, not retreaters. He said you and I are to be ambassadors, that our businesses are meant to be embassies or consulates or outposts for his kingdom in our respective industries, for our respective people, for our respective communities. Like, he put us in the mess. Just like Zenya said, why would I leave the war zone? I want to build in the war zone. You and I have got a pretty darn comfortable environment here, but we're called to live in the war zone of culture he's called us to. I'm going to betray my Baptist roots enough just to share one last little chart before I give you Holy Discontents, a cool visual, and then we'll get some Q&A in a little bit. I'm Baptist enough to care about this data. So in 2015, this is American CDC data about why people die. FYI, you and I have a pretty high mortality rate. Every one of us will probably die of something, and at some point you'll have a diagnosis code. And so these are the top 10 diagnosis codes why people died in 2015. We spend billions of dollars trying to elongate life and treat things here. We celebrated a cancer victory today. We heard about a brother who's wrestling with cancer today. Huge deal, etc. But in 2015, 1.83 million Americans died not knowing Jesus. There's plenty of saints that died over here that this was just the diagnosis code stamp before they went to heaven. I mean, I've lost grandparents to these types of conditions. They're in heaven today. Great life with Jesus. So those people, that's the ones I'm worried about. Now, updated for 2022, where's it at? Are we getting better at things? Here's it. Congratulations. We spend billions of dollars in healthcare. We are actually getting better at extending life. 2022 data. Less people died in 2022 of heart disease than did back in 2015. Fewer people. Not fewer people got it, because again, we like our hamburgers, but you're not dying of it. We can do heart transplants like no other. We can do bypasses. We can do amazing stuff. Fewer people die of cancer right now. Fewer Americans died of cancer in 2022 than died in 2015. We get it a lot, but we're beating it better than ever. We still wreck ourselves, so accidents are up. So you can't save us from stupidity. Like, there's the thinning of the herd, all that kind of stuff, Darwin Awards. This is right after COVID, so we still have the remnants of pneumonia and flu-type deaths. Respiratory deaths classically were down, but I think that's kind of an alternating. Strokes are down. Less people are dying of stroke. Not fewer having them, less dying. Less people died of Alzheimer's. Like, we are killing these killers and elongating life. Diabetes is up because, man, I live in South Texas. We love our tacos, we love our sugar, we love our food. So we're still, and the deaths of despair are up. But the number that's really, really up is the deaths of people not knowing Jesus. I mean, that's all-time high in our country right now. So I'm Baptistic enough in my heritage to want to see us change those demographics through what we do. I'm Baptistic enough to go, the reason we need workplace chaplaincy is because half the people who go to work for you don't actually even know what Jesus said. They've not rejected him, they just don't know him. They don't know what they don't know. This is here. This is not Ukraine, this is not Taiwan, this is not South Africa, this is here. Frankly, it's worse here than some of these places. So some of my holy discontents, why I'm in C12, I hope we will leave a legacy, not just live. I hope we will live a legacy, not just leave one. And that will be lives changed by the gospel. Here's my holy discontents. One, I cannot stand how many Christians in America are living in suspended animation, saying in this kind of anesthetized perversion of the Christian life, like I'm just supposed to be nice, be comfortable, and hope I don't do bad things and go to heaven. Like, that is just not what we're here for. You have no less accountability to Jesus for radical faithfulness and courage that a pastor does, or Jen in Ukraine, or some leading an NGO. I don't think your tax status makes you more accountable or less accountable to everyone else around you in the room here. We are sons and daughters of God. We are brothers and sisters in Christ. We are stewards of organizations. We got resources, people, process, and we're going to be accountable for those things. And I see way too many going, I will one day become super generous, super bold, when I retire, when I sell my business. And I would just say, like, it's a lie, and it's a tragic waste of life to live in suspended animation for some sort of pipe dream grand finale. Can't stand that. Compromised gospel, settling for anything less than being a disciple. Like, we're either a disciple of Jesus, which doesn't just mean I read about Jesus. It means, I was just reading this morning in 1 Chronicles 14. So you got King David, amazing, King Solomon, mixed, and then his son Rehoboam becomes king, messes things up, the kingdom splits, if you guys know biblical history there. Sad thing, chapter 14 is the end of Rehoboam's life. Rehoboam actually hears from God. God speaks to him. God sends a prophet who gives him revelation. At one point, Rehoboam's being attacked by the king of Egypt, cries out to God that people repent, and God says, okay, I hear you. Okay, I'm not going to let you be wrecked. Like, he actually sees the hand of God. He has the heritage of God. He lives in the Bible Belt because it says all the priests of the northern kingdom rushed into Judah, and so they had 3 times the density of all the other markets, so he had more pastors. It's like North Carolina. He had pastors everywhere. He knew the teachings of God. He had heard God. He'd even been part of amazing God moments. At the end of his life, it says, but Rehoboam did evil because he never fully set his heart to seek after God. And then his life ends. And I was just thinking about this morning, like, you can be in C12. You can know lots of things about God. You can have heard from God. You can see miracles. You can be part of amazing experiences. But unless your heart is fully set to seek after God, then it's less than being a full disciple. Social spells. I think America is under this voodoo spell around this idea of life and success and what we're meant to have. And there's a statement by my friend John Stonestreet that ideas have consequences and bad ideas have victims. And I think we have a lot of bad ideas around life and value and truth that is wrecking us. You have got a lot of potential. We praise you and say, you got high potential. But potential is only cool if it becomes kinetic. And so that, if all the potential in this room, like, you've got, like, I do a lot of work with Alliance Defending Freedom on religious liberty issues. But the reality is, America already has the best religious liberty in American history. You've got more freedoms and privileges than any society in human history. And we get real upset at the possible loss of them, which I agree. But I think, frankly, most of us are afraid of losing the privilege to get to use something we weren't ever using to begin with anyway. Like, I frankly wish more C12 members were getting in trouble for pushing the envelope of how bold you were being, that you were getting persecuted and prosecuted, and we were having to raise legal defense funds to help rescue you. I wish more C12 members were getting in trouble. Where's Doug at? Where's Doug McKinnon? Not for being stupid. We know there is, not to be bad about it, not because Doug and I know somebody. But I think we are in love with our potential, and we're not kinetic with it enough. And I'd love to see, like, if what this room alone could do would rock this community. I think too many Christians are living as a bunker instead of an embassy, where Christians are praying for and fixated on preservation of your comfort versus maximization of your calling, your potential, and your impact. If you wouldn't say, God, I'm willing to lose my business if that would mean everyone in my business was changed. God, I'm willing to have to downsize my life if that meant the kingdom expanded. If you're not actually at that level of, like, I seek after God over all things, then you're at some level a bunker person versus an embassy person. And that's a holy discontent. And then frankly, mud pies. You know, C.S. Lewis said Christians are like children living in the slums making mud pies, slapping at the hand of someone trying to take you away to the seaside for a holiday. And the problem is we can't even imagine how much better it is when we think God's trying to take mud pies away from us. And he's actually trying to give us a better life. And I frankly think sometimes we hear talks like this and we go, man, I know God wants more from me. Here's the part. I actually fundamentally believe God needs and wants nothing from you. Like, God doesn't need your money. God doesn't need your voice, your skill. Like, he doesn't need us. He's sovereign, owns everything. He's got the pagan's money and your money. He's got all, like, it's literally like we were created for more. We're here for more. And there's actually greater joy he wants us to know. And I think it's too many are settling for a mud pie Christian life. So here's let me mix it up and give you a little visual. I lived in Alaska Alaska is not a agricultural state. We don't do a lot of farming in Alaska because we got ice and snow, and so we don't. There's one county in Alaska that does farming, and it's the county I lived in called the Matanuska-Susitna Borough. It's Alaska shaped like this. It's really, God loves Alaska, so he made every one of you actually has Alaska built into your body. It's this right here. This is where 90% of the population of Alaska lives because it's the civilized portion. This little borough right here is the one farming district. We can't grow wheat or corn or cotton or anything that requires a long growing season because ice, but we have these amazing growing days. So from like May through September is just awesome. 20 hours of sunlight, so we crush it in things like berries, squash, cucumbers, melons, that kind of stuff. We just crush it. If you go to the local grocery store, what's the grocery store you guys go to in North Carolina? It's H-E-B in Texas, because you guys don't have H-E-B. Harrison's? Okay, never heard of it. If you go to the store, you'll buy pumpkins that look like this. Pumpkins are typically 10 to 20 pounds. This is a little pumpkin seed. Plant a pumpkin seed in the ground, turns a little green little plant, produces a yellow little flower, eventually grows an orange little nub, and you get pumpkins. Pumpkins are fairly easy to grow. They just like space, they like moisture, they don't like it being super hot, they don't like it being super cold, they like space to spread out, and you get pumpkins like this. They're not super complicated. What's the biggest pumpkin you've ever seen? You seen a big one? And where were you at?
In Napa.
In Napa? How many pounds do you guess it is, maybe? Hundreds of pounds. What's the biggest one you've seen?
Yeah, I would say 70 men.
Yeah, some would be a little too heavy to lift up. So typically, this has got ruined recently. Somehow Connecticut beat us. Usually Alaska sets the world record at the state fair every year for the largest pumpkin. Usually it's around this one is 2,157 pounds. Now they're not pretty. It's like an amoeba from space. It takes a forklift to haul them thing. I mean, you're talking like a VW car here. So they are obnoxious. This is not a GMO modified. It's not a special hormone growth seed. It's the same seed as what you grow in farms in Georgia or Tennessee or Florida, where a lot of the big pumpkin farms are. It's the same species, same seed type. The difference is we get 20 hours of sunlight. It's always between 60 degrees and 80 degrees. We got 30 to 40 feet of topsoil, and we got space. And so the pumpkins just go hog wild. And so they go nuts. So the same seed that gives you this can also give you this. Same seed, just different environment. Another little cool thing about pumpkins, did you know that you can create Frankenstein pumpkins? So Frankenstein pumpkins is not a different seed or species either. It's actually the same seed, plant in the ground, green plant, yellow flower, orange nub, fruit begins to grow. If you plant it and then you put a glass jar or plastic cellophane kind of wrapper, as long as it's translucent, so light gets through, the fruit will grow, still retain its color, but it will completely conform to the contours of that wrapper. So you can create Mickey Mouse-shaped pumpkins, box-shaped pumpkins, heart-shaped pumpkins, or Frankenstein-shaped pumpkins. And it's just the mold. It's not a species. The fruit is just reflecting the invisible environment wrapped around it. And if in the middle of growth season, if you were to crack the glass, the fruit would resume growth. Because again, the DNA is not wrong. It's just responding to the jar it's placed in. So you can do all kinds of stuff. Well, I think that jar analogy around a pumpkin seed, I'm going to leave this here. Whoever wants it can have it. That jar, that same dynamic that happens to pumpkins, happens to businesses, happens to people. How many of you have hired an employee who was unhappy, miserable, and not performing well somewhere else, came to work for you and flourished? Okay, who's willing to admit you had someone leave you and went and did better things somewhere else? Anybody had that happen? Where you're like, where is that work ethic here? Why did they do that when they worked for me? The reality is probably because they didn't have a good manager before, or probably because of your work environment or the role they're in. Like humans tend to flourish when they're right role, right place, right policies, right manager. Businesses, the vision you have, your leadership. Like I've made a lot of bonehead mistakes leading C12. I would tell the board regularly, like, the biggest limiting factor and risk to C12's growth is me. My flesh, my foolishness, my blindness, all the invisible stuff. That's what can most wreck the organization. So we are the molds that can absolutely limit this, the policies we've got. And so I think one of the imperatives we all have to ask as we think about what we're going to do is figuring out what those jars are in our life and breaking them. Breaking the glass to go, hey, where do I have limiting beliefs about what is true about Greensboro, about my company, about what we could do, what we can budget? You heard Brandon West's story. He's like, man, this seems crazy, but we're going to set the goal, and then they blew past crazy. Limiting belief. Are you trying to maintain? Like if Doug and Tripp and Nick try to just preserve what Greensboro, what the Piedmont Triangle was, that's a different strategy than going, we're not trying to say, can we preserve the members we've got, but can we reach the city as it should be done? That's a totally different posture. Are we working from a vision of the future that's so compelling that it actually demands us to break things? Or are we just looking at a rearview mirror saying, this is what we've always heard we can't do? My invitation is that we are not in C12 because we want to fulfill an American dream, but we want to figure out how to break glass and have a better vision. So Doug said, let's talk about SVA. If you want to be serious, so SVA, by the way, spiritual value add, we talk about it in 3 major categories: salvation, reaching people to the gospel; sanctification, encouraging people to grow in discipleship to him; and service, showing the love of Jesus in the name of Jesus, meeting needs in a way that brings glory to the Father. So the 7 things I would say are critical to people who actually get serious about this and produce the kind of outcomes that are uncommon. First, the boring stuff that most people skip, and this drives me nuts. If business's ministry is really what's going to endure, you actually got to do the hard stuff of governance. Like mission, vision, values, bylaws, corporate documents, policies, protocols. Like we've got written into our bylaws of our LLC, this business is owned by followers of Jesus Christ who practice Judeo-Christian values, who believe the Bible is wholly true, who believe what the Bible says about gender, about marriage, and these things will be held ultimate, that we are going to have these truths trump even commercial interest, how we will handle litigation and disputes. Those things are not just like ideas we verbally share. They're drafted into our corporate documents, our handbook. Every employee has to sign off a faith acknowledgement form. We've got board governance policies that say, like, Mike Sharrow can't go nuts and just change things. Like, here's what this business must always represent to make this thing mission true, so it's resistant to legal persecution or being hijacked. So if you've not done that stuff, then sadly, when you leave, your business will stop doing those things. Like it will just evaporate. Second, you actually have to have a plan. Do you actually have goals you're measuring, plans you're evaluating, budgets you're allocating, measures and metrics of both inputs and outputs? If not, then you don't think as seriously about ministry as you do about sales. A lot of people are like, I just don't like to measure spiritual things, but I don't ever hear them do that about their bank statements or their cash flow or their pricing schedules. So we tend to measure and have pretty good protocol and disciplines around the stuff that's critical to business, and I think ministry should be just as much. Leadership, ownership, sinking. This probably should be number 1. So number 3, this is maybe not in sequence. If you're not actually meeting with the Father, the actual owner of the business, to ask him what his heart for your business is, then you're probably getting it wrong. So if we're not having daily quiet time with God, I think we're wildly at risk, because we need to be asking him, what do you care about? Why do you have this business? What is your fruit? What's the ROI you'd like? He's the owner of the business. Prayer requests and open forum topics. Here's a question. How many of your prayer requests in C12 and how many open forum topics have you put up where it was about changing an SVA outcome? So I'll go back to Jamie's annoying question to me at my church. If every open forum topic for the last year had been answered, and if every prayer request you asked your peers to pray for was answered, how many lives would be changed and how much SVA impact would be happening? I think it's really interesting to ask yourself periodically, when's the last time I came to C12 with a burning SVA driving question? Where I was going, man, I really feel called to get involved in this community partnership, address this issue, and I don't know how to do it better. Wouldn't it be, if we don't have a discontent and a vision reflecting an open forum, then I'd say that's probably a missing piece. This is not because Jason Bates is here and he scares me, he's taller and all that kind of stuff, but chaplains. And not just chaplains to say, check, there, got chaplains, but like actually deployed chaplains. Where they're meeting with your employees know they can meet after hours with them and their families, where you're thinking about your vendors and your customers, and you're actually going, how do I deploy chaplains in key times? If it's not delegated, installed, and expected of other people. And at the bottom, man, if you don't just have a holy discontent and a deep, deep joy in it, those are the people who crush SVA. So I really, really do believe that business's ministry can change the world, but only if it's fully deployed. I think you could summarize everything we talked about today in C12 that we're called to glorify God, which means reflecting his character and how we do things. So he's excellent, he's good, he's beautiful, he's perfect, he's loving, he's kind. So if we're not demonstrating the rule and the reign of Jesus in every aspect of our business, then we're not glorifying him. And then we must actually give glory to him, which means actually identify as his, not plagiarize it when we're praised, cite the source and the true ownership of what we're doing. And I just want to reiterate everywhere I go, business as a ministry is not just go doing some ministry stuff. It's understanding God actually cares about the business you're running, why you do it, how you do it, the impact it has, and who you're becoming. The greatest risk to me of C12 is that groups like this just become virtuous vistage meetings. They always become American, Christian, nice, run good businesses, don't do bad things. Frankly, Mormons do that well. Buddhists do that fantastic. Muslims do that well. Disciples of Jim Collins do that well. We're called to be disciples of Jesus. And if it's not markedly, distinctly, dangerously different, then I think we are in danger. And so I think when we live our lives and our identity fully as businesses that belong to Jesus, then that makes us dangerous. We will threaten society. We will change things. It will cost us things and it will change the world. But if we live the American dream with some Bible Belt Christianese, then I think we're in danger of missing the plot altogether. I'm super grateful you're in C12. I need C12. I need this. I'm thrilled and impressed by the stories that regularly come out of the Piedmont Triangle. I really, really hope the best stories are the ones that are in the next 5 years, not the last 5 years. I hope the next C12 heroes inspire the old C12 heroes. That's part of why we're here. So I'm going to pray for that, and then we're going to go to Q&A. Father, I want to join what Paul prayed. Paul prayed that Christians would know the fullness of who we are in Christ, that we would be filled up with knowledge of you, that we'd have a passion for your kingdom, that we know how great your love for us is, that we would realize probably what we're asking for, thinking about, or imagining, even our vision, even that cool graphic for 2030 is probably safe. It's probably child's play. So Holy Spirit, I pray that you would agitate and stir up the hearts and imagination of your children in this room to who you uniquely made them to be, why they're here, why they're in this business, why they're at this moment in life, and what you want them to do next. And Father, I pray that this community would see saints who have such radical joy in you, such deep contentment in you, Christ, such fearlessness, such zeal for your kingdom, that it would rattle the cages. They would make casual Christians uncomfortable, that it would alarm and offend the enemy. Father, I pray this community of C12 leaders would be dangerous for the glory of your name, by the power of your name, we pray this, Jesus. Amen.
Mike, thank you very much. Let's give Mike a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much.